Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, people of the world. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a special guest, but everyone's a special guest because they take time to join me on the show. I'm joined by Jeff Raderstrong. Now, we got connected because if you know, I recently published a book, 40 Years of Advice, and I connected with Jeff about potentially collaborating on other works that I'd like to publish in the future. And in our conversation, Jeff let me know about his career, and I thought it would be great to talk to the listeners about and, just get a little bit of different ways that people can use their degree and do different things in the world of creativity. So, Jeff, can you give the listeners a little bit of a background on who you are?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat a little bit more. I always love talking about what I do and talking to people who are, doing good work. So, so I'm a ghostwriter. And professional writer who works with leaders from all different backgrounds to help them tell their stories, get their message out there, and generally just support, their thought leadership and their desire to influence change in the world. And I do that in many different ways. One major one is by book writing. And I've found it to be an incredibly rewarding, fulfilling career. I get to work with a lot of different interesting people, learn as much as I can about them and what they do, and sort of become somewhat of an expert myself on their areas of expertise, and just tackle new projects all the time, while also as you referenced, using my craft as a writer to do so. So I feel like it's kind of a perfect path for someone who's looking to do more writing and earn a living by being a writer.
I love it. And so earn a living by being a writer. I think, you weren't aware, but I do work at George Mason University.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in this role, I used to work with students. Now I work mainly with employers, but that expiration piece, right? A lot of students like, what do I do with degree? So
yeah.
what did you study in college?
Totally. Yeah. So I did not study writing. I did take a few classes. I studied economics and global development. But I worked as a journalist in college for the local or the campus paper. And I've been wanting to be a writer for as long as I can remember. But then I pursued sort of I guess you'd call it a content focus that was unrelated to the craft itself.
So economics, but
yeah.
What led you, you were doing the school paper.
Yeah.
As you were studying economics, what was the deciding factor between economics and then maybe going all in on journalism during your experience?
Totally. Yeah. So it's a great question. And, it was a very real debate for me. So, I mean, and I'll just crystallize it with a choice I made. I graduated in 2009, which, if you remember, was a terrible time to be going into the job market. I had an unpaid internship as a journalist in Minneapolis, where I grew up. It was a new, online website, news website, which was like, back then was like a new thing.
Yeah.
Or I had a sort of a job offer in, I wouldn't say it was in economics, but it was more in what I had studied in DC. So I'd studied economics, like I said, but it was more of a focus on nonprofit management and global development, like I said. So this job in DC was going to be focused on communications, essentially, for a small local nonprofit there. And so I sort of had these twin passions, and ultimately decided to, go towards the communications route, the nonprofit route, because, I saw it as a more of a viable career path. And in some ways, it's, this role I'm in now is kind of a full circle moment for me, where I circuitously made my way back to, dedicating myself to writing full time. And I certainly wouldn't have been here without taking that path. But yeah, honestly, to answer your question explicitly, like, it was just am I going to be able to make a living as a journalist. And back then, and to be frank, even now, it's like maybe, but unsure.
Yeah, well, so I mean, this is great. Like, I think we always explore like your first job is not your forever job.
Yeah.
So as you were diving into this new world and understanding that this job was not your forever job, talk about a little bit of the other values that you had to put in place to say, okay, I need to make a pivot. And also additionally, who were some people that you had to have this conversation with? I know a lot of people, use their parents or mentors in journalism and said, stay out of it, get out while you can. Like, what was some of those early discussions?
Yeah, totally. So like, I mean, that you're totally right. That first job, it was, I mean, I learned a lot, right? And I mean, I actually did my first ghostwriting task. One of the first things I did at that job was I showed up and the executive director said, hey, write me a letter to the editor to go into the Washington Post. And so I did, and it got in, and I have it still. I clipped it out, right? That's back when we bought papers, right? And so I didn't know it at the time, but that was obviously ghostwriting, right? And so that wasn't most of what I did, but it was some elements of what I did. But but then to answer the second part of your question, I had lots of conversations. I had a relatively prestigious journalism internship the summer before I graduated, where I went to the Seattle Times and worked with some editors there who were, really old school. One of the guys I worked with was an investigative reporter who was just doing deep work that, unfortunately is not that common anymore. And, both of them were pretty blunt with me about the prospects, right? The career prospects that journalism would offer me. They weren't sort of down on it, but they also weren't, they weren't trying to sell it to me, right? And so I think that conversation, along with just, again, my sense of what was out there, was what led me to that. But again, to answer your question, I have friends I graduated with who are journalists now and still are doing great, so it's not like it was an impossible path. I think for me, just the uncertainty of it and knowing myself and learning about myself through that choice, led me to, again, the quote unquote safer path of communications. And for me specifically, communications within nonprofits.
So, okay, transition. You went to nonprofits, and you're utilizing these skills of writing. Talk a little bit about your early in the nonprofit world and building your skill as a writer, particularly as a writer that might be a little bit different than journalism, right?
Yeah, totally.
Talk about those different and how that helped you in your growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think in some ways my choice was kind of the best of both worlds because I got to explore my desire and interest in just like understanding how nonprofits work as a like a economic entity, right? But then also learned a lot of different ways to write. To your question, right? I learned how to write for a newsletter. I learned how to write for a blog post. I learned how to write for a letter to the editor, like I mentioned. I learned how to write for a fundraising campaign, right? Mm-hmm. And did all those things. And because within that first job, but also more generally, the first stage of my career, because I was working for smaller organizations, I had the ability to do a lot of different things because they didn't have a fully staffed team because they were nonprofits, right? And so I really benefited from being able to do a lot of different things. And I think what was most important about that in terms of the specific skill set around writing is that I just learned not to be too precious with things, which now that I'm a professional, writer, I have really learned the value of editing, of feedback, of collaboration. And of course, as a ghostwriter, I'm always in collaboration with people. And, I've worked with and seen others, journalists and other writers who didn't have that experience transition into ghostwriting, and they are very precious with their stuff. They're very beholden to the written word, and I say I'm more beholden to my client or like the collaborator, the person I'm working with, and I think that makes me more successful as a ghostwriter specifically.
Yeah, can you? I heard you said precious multiple times, and just curiosity, what is that notion of being precious writing, and explain that as maybe what would that mean as a college student? Like if you're precious, you let that go.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, as a college student, it's probably a little different because you are going to be graded on something. But for me, I have learned that if you sit on a piece of writing, it's only going to get worse. And by that, I mean the best thing you can do is get it out into the world to get feedback, because the piece of writing is almost always being used as a means to an end, right? Like it is not an end in of itself, right? If you write a LinkedIn post, for example, I'll just use it as an example, right? No one is going to look at your LinkedIn post and say, "Oh my goodness, that was a wonderful LinkedIn post. I'm so glad that I read that." They might, I'm not discounting the fact that LinkedIn posts can be beautiful writing, but it almost always is means to an end. You want them to click on something. You want them to be inspired to learn more about the work you do. You want them to respond. You want whatever it may be, right? And so I think this is just a more specific way to say the often used phrase that don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, right? So if you sit around and try to make something perfect, if you're holding on to it like a precious sort of gemstone, no one's ever going to see that gemstone, right? And the point of writing is for people to read it, right? And then therefore do something about it, right? So that's what I mean by that.
So I mean, what I'm hearing too is like paralysis by analysis.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely.
How do you balance, quality, right? You definitely want to have good quality, but also timeliness and not holding on to it. And thus, how did that, I'm assuming it's easy, not easier, but that task is a little different in your world because you have someone that says, I need this ghostwriter. I gave you a timeline. So that might expedite the paralysis, right? Like you don't have time to. But how would you navigate that as a actual creative writer, and how would you help your clients get over that? Because I'm assuming they might be the ones that are mainly so precious on what they wrote that you're ghostwriting with.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's so much in there. So like I think creative writing is actually different. I've been doing more creative writing, as I've moved into this space. And I feel like that is a different relationship because most of the time it's just you're doing the writing. You have to let it sit and you have to basically forget what you wrote and then come back to it and look and say like, is this any good? Right. I also, but similarly with creative writing, I think it's important to have, workshops and community around that. And again, that's a kind of a whole nother conversation. But, on the business writing side, I would say that, the quality is important, right? And I think that is, when you say, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, well, it's got to be good, right? If it's not good, then, you got something to work on. And so I think I have benefited from more or less 10 to 15 years of writing experience, professional business writing experience through my job, in which I was either, editing someone else's piece, had deliverables to create by a deadline, but there was always someone else to read it and offer me feedback, right? And of course, right, like I didn't always write good things, right? And so I've learned how to do that, and now I'm at a point where, if I have an outline for a op-ed, 800 word op-ed, right? I can deliver on that pretty quickly. And I don't say that to be sort of arrogant, but it's just like, well, that's just what I do, right? In the same way, a professional musician can pick up a guitar and play, any popular song, right? And so I think there is just, and this to your audience, right, to your student audience, right, like there is just an element of practice. And so what I always tell people is, just write as much as you can. I myself have had many, many, many different blogs over the years, right? And I benefited from the birth, starting my career kind of at the birth of the modern internet, which allowed for writing, easy writing and publishing. And like I said, that engagement, I'm sure most of those original pieces I created were pretty terrible. Right. And so, but now I have learned things as a professional. I've honed my craft. And then to your kind of the third part of your question around client work, man, I think that's the hardest part of my job is to help clients get their stuff out there. I would say, most of my work is almost therapy to say, this is good enough, or why aren't you wanting to get this out there? What is missing? And breaking through that analysis paralysis, because they don't have the orientation that I have. I'm offering them a skill set where I can say, hey, this is a good piece of writing, right? I know it's a good piece of writing. Is this going to meet your goals? Is this going to, is this going to achieve what you want it to achieve? Is this the right positioning? I can provide advice on that as sort of someone who's done this a while, but ultimately I can't answer that question. And in some ways, that's the hardest question to answer, right? Is what do you want to achieve with this? That has to come from them. And like I said, I almost serve as a therapist and even more of a business coach. And I don't know if you want to get into the AI of it all, but that's why I'm not actually, I just posted something yesterday about this. That's why I'm not worried about AI at all, because it's not about ultimately it's not about the writing. It's about the relationship. It's the connection, the engagement, and the human side of things. The writing is kind of the easy, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's more of a straightforward element of the work I do.
I love that you brought it up. I'm gonna tail back to that one.
Yeah.
So like, now that you're working at nonprofits, what was the shift? What made you want to go into ghostwriting?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, like I said, I always wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to specifically write books. I just love books, and always have and always will. And I thought that there was no way for me to do that and make money, right? I think my parents raised me to be very practical in that way, right? And both my parents sort of grew up without they didn't grow up poor necessarily, but they grew up without the privileges that I had. And so I think they were very focused on making sure me and my siblings were all taken care of. And so, once I got into my career and I was doing fine in my career, and more or less enjoying it, I started to kind of explore what might be next for me. And to be honest, I worked on a book with one of my bosses, about almost 10 years ago now. Yeah. Where she wanted to write a book. We were both employed at this organization. But as a part of her basically content strategy and my team's content strategy, she said, I think it's important that I write a book, and I helped her with that. And she hired a ghostwriter. And it was a wonderful person. It just was not the best fit for what, my boss at the time was trying to do. And so I basically came in and kind of played that role of ghostwriter, or I would say probably now it was more of a developmental editor or book doctoring project. And that just opened my eyes to just that was possible, right? Again, I just literally didn't know that there was an industry out there. And so over time, I slowly got exposed to that. I worked on a couple other books for some folks, and then ended up with that same person for her second book, basically being the lead ghostwriter on that project. And that's what kicked off my, my desire to get into this field. And so I've been doing it about 2 years now, but I sort of slowly been moving into it, since for the last 5 years.
I love that. And then, one of my thoughts is that you recently kind of went full tilt in 2 years.
Yeah.
So talk about those early days of building a client base, or
man,
the hidden curriculum of that industry. Talk a little bit about that, like how that, grew, that journey grew over time.
Yeah. And I this is where it's kind of like a business conversation, right? I think it's probably the same advice I give to anyone who is starting their own sort of service-oriented, client-oriented businesses. I just talked to as many people as possible, got my name out as much as I could, and said yes to everything. There's this other great ghostwriter, John Sternfeld, who happens to just live around one town over from me. He worked on like so many famous people's books. Michael K. Williams's book he wrote, and I talked to him, and he was basically like, for the first year, say yes to everything, and after that, stop. And I did. And so I got a lot of work really quickly. That some of it was fine. Some of it was not fine. It was meaning like it was not well paying. Right. And then I've slowly pared that back. Although right now I'm kind of in a moment of saying yes to more things because, for a lot of reasons. and because some projects are winding down, and just I feel like I want to take on more again. And so I really had to manage the boom and bust that comes with that, and that comes with starting out as a relatively new person to this work, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was really cool. I kind of didn't put any pressure on myself because I was like told myself, all right, I'm going to do this for a year. I made some mistakes for sure, but I learned a lot, and now I'm as you kind of say, I'm full into it and able to sort of structure myself a little differently. I'm renting an office, I've formalized sort of a business development plan, all the things that are kind of unrelated to writing, but more to the business itself.
I love that. And then, as you were exploring and doing this, how did you build up your skills of writing? Because now
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is becoming obviously this is your full time.
Yeah.
And ghostwriting, I'm not assuming, I know
Yeah.
it's a unique skill set. So how did you build your skill set concurrently as you dived into this new industry?
Yeah, totally. So I think it's probably there are two paths. There's the craft skill set, and then there's the kind of business side, right? Because like I said, yes, I'm a ghostwriter, but so much of what I'm doing is actually more that coaching element, that human engagement element. And I'm finding that like people might get just as much, if not more, value out of that relationship than uh, the writing, the deliverable side of things. And so the writing side, right? Like, yeah, I've certainly learned a lot, and just even the last couple of weeks, I've had some good lessons learned about kind of the opposite of perfect being the enemy of the good. Like instead of being responsive to my clients with what they want to put in the paper and the chapter and the whatever it is, like understanding what would make the best piece, even if they don't see it yet, and even if they don't want me to, and they're going to get mad at me, actually saying like, no, I know this is the right thing. And so I feel like that's kind of a different level of engagement and writing, both on the writing side, but also the client management side. It's like, how do you manage a client who, it's not that what they want is bad, it's just not the full picture yet. And how do I, support them in coming to that place of discovery or whatever it may be.
So obviously entrepreneurship could be a solo thing, obviously solopreneur. We also understand that there's opportunities where you need a team or a community around you.
Yeah.
And so as you were going into this journey, can you speak about the opportunities to collab with other ghostwriters?
Yeah, totally.
A community of ghostwriters or mentorship in ghostwriters, so that you're not really doing this solo, even business, business coaches, whatever. But what team have you, people around you that support you? Because obviously you could do this by yourself, but we all know that.
Oh yeah, no, you could, but you wouldn't be as good, and it would be kind of probably pretty depressing. So I mean, like, first my wife is, she's not a business partner, but we talk about it all the time. She's been incredibly helpful as I've started this up. But there's the Association of Ghostwriters. They have monthly calls. I've created I haven't created. I'm a part of a small group of ghostwriters that meet pretty regularly to just talk about whatever, and that's just more kind of advice, specific, how are you managing this contract? How are you, this, I just had this happen with a client. What do you do about that? To more sort of general advice around is AI affecting your work? Are your leads drying up? Just kind of pulse on the trends of the industry. And then I also have relationships with agencies and publishers and things who they're business development, right? They give me clients, but they also provide support, their editors, their, all those things. And then I have sort of a loose network of people I might rely on or refer clients to, marketers or, editors or, designers, things like that.
So it's without saying, I feel like, I'm included, that everyone and their mama could be a writer. And it seems like the market for writing books is blown up. Self-publishing is a new wave. And I think you spoke about it. You were on the impetus of the internet. So how is that the internet and this really blown up the self-publishing world, and maybe I'm assuming the ghostwriting world has grown concurrently while the publishing world has grown.
Yeah. I mean, the guy who leads this well-known agency, Gotham Ghostwriters, talks about it's the best of times, it's the worst of times, right? So it's the best of times because there's so much interest in writing books, but it's also the worst of times because the market is pretty flooded with people who will help you write a book, right? Whether that's publishing or writing or whatever it may be. And so I'm grateful that I've had a lot of work and continue to have a decent pipeline. Like any self-employed person, I always think, oh, this is going to be the last one, right? But like you hear people like famous actors say, "Well, this might be the last movie I ever make." So I just feel like that's probably human nature. As long as you're humble and realistic about your work, you're always going to have some element of what comes next. But to your question about the industry itself, like, yeah, I mean, it's so easy to publish a book these days, right? Like, I mean, you could have a book, especially if you want to use AI, right? AI will spit out a book for you. You fling it on over to Amazon, and it's there. But to me, that begs the question of, why do you want to write a book? What are you going to do with it? And so I think, again, ghostwriters, or at least I should say ghostwriters need to, other people can do what they want. But my approach is you're not adding value unless you are having those conversations about why do you want to do this, and how is it going to serve you to meet. Again, I work with business people, right? So your business's goals. If you're not doing that, if you're not having that conversation, I mean, you're leaving value on the table for you and for them and for your client,
So with that inverse, obviously saturated market or growing market, you're on the other end.
Yeah.
I want to write a book, and I would like to have the assistance of a ghostwriter.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that I, as a person that wants to publish, should use as the way I vet whether someone is a good fit for me to be a ghostwriter for me?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's kind of like the obvious stuff, like have they written books that are related? Do they have a track record? Do they seem like they are going to really be a collaborator, or are they going to be just sort of a scribe, right? And those are all questions that depend on your personal working style and preferences and all that. But I do think you can, you got to feel that person out and see if it's a fit or not. And it's a pretty intense relationship, right? I mean, there are people that I've worked with on books, and like, I know a lot about them, and I spend a lot of time with them, and they consider me to be a good friend, and I consider them to be a good friend. These are people who are going to probably be in my life forever, right? And so you and I think that speaks to how it was a good fit. It is a good fit, right? Like, I think if it wasn't, we wouldn't be in touch anymore, right? And so it is a very in-depth relationship. And so, a lot of people who want to write a book are like, well, I want to get it done. I want to be done now, and I, I understand the desire for speed, but sometimes it's better to take your time, interview people. Look, it's always good to get a few options on the table. And I would say that, everyone always says, oh, sorry, I'm talking to some other people. And, I always say, yeah, you got to talk to a lot of different people. You got to find that right fit.
So inversely, what do you vet as a good person to work with as a client, besides,
Sure.
Like, I want to protect my piece too as a ghostwriter.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like that first year when I said yes to everything, I learned a lot about what's not a good fit. So I think that there's a few things, right? I mean, this seems silly to say, but like I like working with people who want to write a book. There are a lot of people who say they want to write a book and they don't. What they want is a book. They don't actually want to go through the process of writing a book. And even though I'm like literally writing the words on the screen, like it still is a lot of work for the other person to like think through the stuff, right? And put yourself out there in that way. And so I think related to that, I also like working with people who just like want to get stuff done, you know? They want to get stuff out there. They're not going to be too precious, like I was saying earlier, right? They understand quality, but they understand quality, but they also are willing to be a little iterative, right? Let's say, and collaborative. And then I think like people who are, people who understand the process. And I don't mean like they have done this before, but just like people who understand that like this is a collaboration, this is a relationship, it's a push and pull. I'm a person, they're people, and there's going to be strengths that I bring and weaknesses that I bring, and vice versa, right? Of just like being, understanding of that. Like there's this one client I have now who's probably, he's probably the nicest guy I've worked with so far. And we had a lot of contention in the last month over a book we're writing. And we kind of just had a breakthrough yesterday. But throughout it all, he was like, I'm frustrated at this process. I'm frustrated with where we're at, but I appreciate, basically I appreciate what you're doing, and that's like the distinction. It's like understanding that there might be frustrations when trying to take on something as daunting as writing a book, but that like, we're all doing our best. And I think that's just like that's probably a human element that goes beyond the process of writing a book,
And also in regards to subject matter, has there ever been a time where I know everyone has their individual values, where you either it was the content or the person that you're like, this is not aligning with me, maybe it was a book like, get over on everybody business rules. And you're like, I don't want to,
totally
content like this, that's not the content that aligns. Even as a ghostwriter, they'll never know it's connected to me as a ghostwriter, but in my heart, I'll know that I was contributing to that. Is there been that discussion in your mind too?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I actually have never had I've had it maybe a few times where I've gotten some like inbound requests where I've like, I don't know about this. But honestly, a lot of people are like, oh, would you ever write, I'm tend to lean liberal, right? Politically, like, oh, would you ever write a book for like a Trump supporter? Absolutely. Because it part of what I think my work is about finding the universal connection between the author and, the reader, which, theoretically could be anybody. And so, I fundamentally believe that, everyone has a story to tell and that we can all connect through that story, connect with anyone. And so, I prefer to sort of, I kind of prefer to work with people who disagree with me, right? And I don't mean like, again, politically, but just like, oh, I've never thought of this perspective before. And so, however, to your question, I would say that there are certain books where I think you kind of just outlined it. Again, it's not political, but it's like basically the books of like how to screw people, like books that are clearly designed to be pretty aggressive, and about kind of tricking people, or like I would never work on like a pickup artist book or something like that, right? There's some
that's exactly what I was talking about. Like,
like
kind of seems sleazy. I ain't trying to do
exactly. The books that are sort of, maybe they're not trying to harm on their face, but that they do. I'm trying to think of another example, because there's definitely been a few where I'm like, like I don't think I would ever work on a book that was trying to make the case that social media is good for children, for example, right?
Mm.
Or that guns, a more unregulated market for guns is going to make us safer. And then on sort of the liberal side, right? Like, or, quote unquote liberal side, like, I don't think I would work on a book that is in defense of cancel culture, right? Things that are just unnuanced and clearly brazenly about a certain point of view.
Too polarized, not allowing discussion.
Exactly. Nuance, that sort of thing.
And also, I think that, at the end of the day, too, is I would still have a hard time promoting something that, like, I wouldn't, like, fiscal responsibility or taxes. Maybe we can talk about it in different ways.
Yeah.
Money, but I think things that are directly against, identity or something like that. I don't know. I just personally wouldn't feel comfortable. So, but I'm assuming it doesn't come in very often, right? Like I'm assuming most people that want to write those books kind of stand on business and don't want a ghostwriter. They just write it themselves. That's if that's such strong ideology that if they have such a strong, firm ideology, I'm assuming they would want to write it themselves.
Or find someone that's super aligned with them, right? Yeah, I guess that's actually a great way to put it. Like, I wouldn't want to write for someone who's an ideologue, right? In the truest sense of that, and I have actually worked with some people who are ideologically very rigid. It happened to be about an ideology that I agreed with, right? Like he was coming at it from a very, I would say, progressive perspective, but it was so rigid that I was like, I don't think this is a good book, or like, this is not for me. It was almost like a manifesto, let's say. Right?
Yeah. So then my thought is, with that being said, I can also inversely see there's a time where you really connected to the subject.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't want to ghostwrite this junk. I want to write this.
Yeah.
There's been a part where I'm like, man, this is a great topic. I'm mad, I'm mad at, not mad, but like, dang, I wish I would have came up with that. I wish it could have been my book instead of ghostwriting it.
Yeah. To be honest, I haven't. There's certainly topics of books that I've really resonated with and been like, man, I'm so happy to be on this project. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, because I approach this from a deep lens of collaboration, and it's less about what I'm writing and more about the person I'm writing for, I have not felt that way yet. People always ask, like, aren't you annoyed your name isn't on the cover? I'm like, no, one, because people pay me to do it. So like, whatever, and two, I just don't, the book wouldn't exist without the author. Right.
So, as you've gone through this, have you ever seen your book on the shelf and like, just that kind of like, I know I contribute to it, but you still got to keep it quiet. Like, I don't know. Do you have to sign like an NDA to let them like that no one knows you're the ghostwriter?
I've never had I might have had to sign one or two NDAs. I've never, but like, that's not really a discussion. Usually what I do, like a book is about to come out and like the dude, he's a great guy, right? Like I'm continuing to work with him, like awesome collaboration. Love it. Really excited to continue the work. He doesn't want me to really talk publicly about the work or the book, I should say, right? I'm not in the acknowledgments. Usually the ghostwriter gets acknowledged as like an editor or something. Didn't put me in it. And like, was I a little disappointed? Yeah, probably a little bit. But like, you know what? Again, like it's all about that person. And it doesn't really get to me. I know I did it. I can, and sometimes with permission, I'll be like, even if the person's like, oh, I don't want you to talk about this. I'll be like, hey, I've got this potential client, similar book topic. Do you mind if I just share a chapter? And they're almost always like, of course, they just don't want it publicly out there. Right. So yeah, no, it doesn't, it's like, I know what I did and it's great. And I love it. I mean, there are some ghostwriters who are like, I don't want my name anywhere on this thing, because they just don't want to have any connection. Once the work is done, they're like, that is done. And if anything hits the fan around that book, I want nothing to do with it,
So how about, I think all kinds of books, I don't know, this is probably a weird question, but have you ever seen your book in like a Barnes & Noble or in a bookstore and you was like, man, this is crazy to see something I contribute to
totally.
in a public place? And tell me a little bit of an experience where that happened, where that was a kind of a surreal experience.
Yeah. Oh, I'll be honest. I go to one bookstore. I go to two bookstores. There's one bookstore in the town where I live, where I get all of my books. And then there's a children's bookstore, right, where I get all the books for my kids. And so I order all my books through those bookstores. And so I haven't like walked in and seen it on the shelves, but I do, like, I went and I picked up a book that I wrote, and like, that is incredible. It's an incredible feeling. And again, I sort of reference how I love books, and I just like, I love the longevity of them, the completeness, just like, it's a physical thing you can hold. It's all there, front, back cover. And it just, it withstands, it endures. Right. And so, absolutely. I mean, it's the best feeling. And again, even though my name isn't on it, it's like, whatever, I know what happened, right? And I have them all. I'm looking at them all right now on my desk. And so it's really, I mean, yeah, like I said, it's incredible.
Do you get a copy of every book you have just for
Yep.
keepsakes? I love that.
Oh yeah.
A
Oh yeah.
full copy.
Edited, and ghostwritten. Yep.
I love that. Now, do you talk about the diversity of people that you connected with? Have you done children's books? Have you worked with young
No.
authors,
Yeah.
old authors, Black authors, LGBTQ? Tell me about the diversity of authors you've worked with.
Yeah, I haven't done children's books again. Like I said, I'm almost exclusively do like sort of CEO prescriptive nonfiction business books. But yeah, my background actually is in social and racial justice. So I worked with a lot of like, quote unquote diverse authors. But yeah, Black authors, queer authors, people who are working towards social impact in some way. I have really diversified since then, and I've really enjoyed that because I found that even though I worked on a book about labor economics, and that was all about like the changing nature of our labor markets. I worked on a book about it was like a leadership book about like business success, but that had similar themes of like how do we see ourselves in the like, so all these books I'm working on are all sort of connected in some way despite the various backgrounds, because they're all focused on like, well, how can the world be better? How is the world changing? Because like, if you want to write a book, if you want to stand out, you're going to say something about what makes you different and stand out. And so that is a thread throughout all my work. Is I work with people who are looking to influence their industries, the world, and doing that through telling their stories.
So with that, I really enjoy, like, that's one of your niches, the social impact.
Yeah.
So one, how do you stay in that space? Do you join other associations that are connected to social impact? And then second, this kind of two-part, if that is kind of like your lane a little bit, how do you stay informed in that work?
Oh yeah. Totally. Yeah. So I mean, just to kind of be a little bit more specific about my business model, I do book writing and sort of project-based deliverables, but I also, kind of have ongoing clients, like I kind of referenced, where I do short form content like blogs and op-eds, and that's kind of how I stay connected, is because they're staying on top of trends, and so I'm staying on top of trends. I read the news, I read the little newsletters that I'm a part of, and all that kind of stuff, and so their work actually keeps me kind of informed, because I have to be.
So with that being said, I mean, I'm assuming your day is wide open and no day is the same.
Yeah.
Have a structure, like these are my writing times. This
Oh
is
yeah.
my search time where I just, like set time aside to read the news. Talk a little bit about how you created structure for yourself as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I try to have a structure. It doesn't always work. I try to keep my meetings like in the afternoons or, Monday, Tuesdays. That's been, I've been doing poorly with that lately. And then try to keep some really big open blocks of time for writing and editing. Recently that's been very hard to do just because it's summer, where I've been doing travel. But I do have some level of, I have some control over it, and I try to, like, I have 2 weeks of work mapped out right now. The next 2 weeks of work mapped out right now. So I know what I'm doing and what I'm doing. I try to keep Fridays more for my own stuff, my own writing, which I do a pretty decent job of. And I try to write for myself every day, which again, I do a pretty decent job of. But, and that's part of why I love what I do. Cause I kind of, I can talk to people like, no one's telling me I can't do what I'm doing,
I love that. And what about the importance of space? Like, I'm assuming, sometimes you need to go to a co-work space for organic collaborations, or go to a coffee shop, or, talk about a little bit about that space component for you as a ghostwriter.
I have my own office. I was used to work at my house, and now I don't, and it's great. I love having my own space. The office I had was really not my own space. I know some people have their own like home office, and I had that, but my house isn't that big. And so I have my own space. It's wonderful. I find myself so productive. It pays for itself essentially, and increased productivity. But there are times, to your point, where I'm like, I need to get out and talk to people. I have, like I said, a community of people that I kind of write with sometimes. I tend to find ways to sort of get out and talk to people. I work in the community where I live, so I walk out the door and I see people that I know. It's wonderful.
All right, that's my last formal question. Is young person, and I know my listenership is all over the place, but also I definitely use this as a career podcast.
Yeah, totally.
So maybe this is not necessarily just a college student, but just anyone that wants to break into ghostwriting. For a person that wants to break into the industry, what are creative tips to be a better writer, and then other ones, business tips to be a businessman that you would suggest to someone trying to break in?
Yeah, totally. Well, you set me up very well for my shameless plug that I'm teaching or hosting a workshop with the Hudson Valley Writers Center on that exact topic in the fall on September 20th. So Hudson Valley Writers Center, if you go there, you'll see that. And I'll put it on my LinkedIn and everything. But to answer your question, I for the craft, honestly, the only advice I have is just write. Write as much as you can, write in different ways, write for yourself, write for other people. I think specifically for ghostwriting, it is really good if you want to do this, if you want to break into it, it's so much easier if you have a portfolio already, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, I need to write a book first. Yeah, that helps. But like, if you have like 5 articles, that you've ghostwritten for other people, that's enough, right? So whether in your current job, if you can say, hey, could I, CEO, could I write something for you and we could get it published? I'm sure they would love that, right? Because assuming they don't have a person already doing that for them. But yeah, getting those clips is really important. And then like I said, different forms, right? So newsletter, whatever it may be. Because again, I think a lot of people are looking for not just a ghostwriter for a book or a certain form, but a full comprehensive partner, collaborator that can do a lot of different stuff for them. And then I guess that transitions in the business side, right? Like just make those connections, talk to as many people as possible. And if you're able to, like I started out doing side gigs, right? Like I just had like 1 or 2 clients during my other. Honestly, it was when my son was old enough to go to daycare, and I just tried to make money to cover that. And so I just had these side gigs that I would write, here and there. And so the best thing to do is if that's the direction you want to go, like reach out to people now, if you have a job or if you are in school, and see what you can cobble together. And again, build those clips, build that portfolio, and just tap into your network, because I'm always amazed when I tap into the network, what I find, what people are looking for. And I also am amazed at how willing and able and ready people are to like bring you on to do stuff like this. Because I think most people are always looking for support, some kind of support in the communications realm, in the marketing realm, because it's always underutilized, under-resourced.
All right, great. Well, this is the next part of my show I call Shot for Shot. You get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you any random question. You want to go first, or I go first?
You go first.
So let's say you can ghostwrite for any person in the world, famous person famous author that's passed away, living or dead. Who would you want to ghostwrite for?
Oh boy, probably Tina Fey. I love comedy, and she's kind of like the foundation of comedy in the last 20 years for me. It's a silly answer though, because she's a great writer, so she would never want to work with me.
Maybe be on her team or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
or be on the SNL ghostwriting team. And
exactly.
Add a joke in there.
Exactly. I would love to be in that room. Yeah. So I ask you one now, huh?
Yep.
What's your next book going to be?
So thank you. You put me on the spotlight, as I shared with you earlier, and it's still a work in progress. But I'm putting it out there into the ethos. So I guess I always do this to myself, where I say I'm gonna do something, and then even if it's digital, it's a year from now or 5 years from now, people are gonna say, "How's that going?" Because I actually put myself out there. So the book that I do want to write someday is called "The Tale of Two Virginias."
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a book about my father-in-law who passed away, and then my dad who's still living. Both of them went to college around the same time in Virginia. My father went to VMI. He was one of the first Black students at VMI, and my dearly deceased father-in-law, who I'm very close to, went to UVA. And I think both through the window of 1967 to 1972.
Mm-hmm.
So they overlapped. And so I call it the Tale of Two Virginias because I wanted to talk about their experiences at different identities. My father-in-law is Jewish. My father is Black, and their different experiences, talking about segregation, talking about what was going on. And so I want to talk about their viewpoint and then also talk about what's going on overall in Virginia history at that time. And so it's going to be a history, I guess, fiction. I don't know, because I kind of want to throw some stories in there, but I also want to make sure that it's very research and has real primary resources or real credible facts. So right now, I'm just getting stories from my dad, getting newspaper articles from UVA at the time that my father-in-law was there, and I'm just building this up almost like a history book. I'm a history major, going back to my roots. So that's kind of my dream. I don't have no deadline for it. I have a rough draft of the outline. And my dad even said that he wanted to join me in this journey, of at least getting some of the sources, like interviewing some of his buddies around him and stuff like that. So that'd be pretty cool. A history book about Virginia. Cool. So it's going to happen.
Forward to read it.
5 years. I got to get this PhD first. And I don't think no one wants me to write for my wife would be mad. She's like, oh, you writing a book? You got all this time to write a book? What about all this time to do your PhD and go to work and take care of these kids?
Yeah, whatever. That's not that important.
So that's in there. So that's in the queue. But that's something I definitely want to get done. So
yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Well, thank you so much for this. This has been a great episode. I definitely think people will take a lot and learn about it. I'm going to call it Journey of a Ghostwriter. So this is the part of the show called Shout Outs and Plugs. Shout outs show love to anyone you want to show love, and plugs, these are ways that the listeners can engage with your social handles, whatever website. I think also just reiterate your workshop as well. But This is the stage, shout outs and plugs.
Yep. Oh, totally. Well, great. I mean, shout outs. I shout out a few specifically on the round ghostwriting, right? I would, if anyone's interested in learning more, check out Association of Ghostwriters, Gotham Ghostwriters, Kevin Anderson and Associates. Readsy is a great platform for self-publishing, but also just like learning about publishing in general. So those are all fantastic resources. And then the plug, shameless self-promotion is Hudson Valley Writers Center on September 20th. And you can sign up. It's called Ghostwriting 101, and how to make a living as a writer. And I'll be teaching that afternoon. So it's just writerscenter.org, or you can Google Hudson Valley Writers Center. And if you click on workshops, you'll see my face.
I love that. And definitely we'll put that in the show notes so that those can follow up and get connected with you. I definitely learned a lot. So Positive Philter listeners, please check out Jeff and all the things he's doing. And if this is something that sparks curiosity as you want to explore your journey as a writer, consider connecting with Jeff.
Yeah, happy. Oh yeah, totally happy to. If you find me on LinkedIn or whatever, and just reference this, I'll always love talking about it. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, Positive Philter listeners, it's been a great show. As you know, every episode is dedicated to the memory of my father-in-law, Jeff Kirsch. So please consider donating to the Jeff Kirsch Anti-Hunger Fund for all his work fighting food insecurity. Additionally, if you're a part of the Mason Nation, please consider submitting a Pass for Patriots to spread kindness throughout George Mason. Continue to like, subscribe, give this a rating on Spotify and a rating and a review on Apple. That helps elevate this podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day. Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.